Some frightening news out of China the other day. China is disappearing Christians who will not submit their religious services to the control of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. More than 30 Zion Church members and leaders have recently been detained by the CCP. The whereabouts of these disappeared religious people is unknown. We don't even know if they're alive, and yet you have likely heard little, if anything, about this. But that is about to change because I'm going to bring you up to speed on this development and on its possible impact on your own right to worship. Your own right to worship God as you choose right here in America. The real story today is how we here in the United States should pay attention to and be concerned about the persecution of Christians in China. President Trump has been concerned about the issue of religious liberty, so much so that he formed a presidential commission on religious liberty. I have the honor of being a member of that commission.
Would you like to say a few words, or are you shy?
Oh, I'll speak.
Let's go.
Mr. President, I can't tell you, first off, how proud I am to see religion coming back to the White House. God bless you. God bless you for doing this. And let me tell you, it's not a popular thing to do in America right now. I am focused on religious liberty here and abroad, and I share my thoughts on that with you now. Religious liberty is the first and foremost freedom granted to us as individual citizens of the United States. It is the right to practice our own religion free from control by our government. That protection is in the Bill of Rights of our Constitution. Now, we often take our own religious liberty for granted, relying on the clear wording of the First Amendment, which says, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Let me say that again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. China's constitution sounds good too when it says in Article 36, no state organ, public organization, or individual may compel citizens to believe in or not believe in any religion, nor may they discriminate against citizens who believe in or do not believe in any religion. So far, so good, right? But then it goes on to say, the state protects normal religious activities. And then it stops protecting its citizens from the power of their own government and starts empowering the government to infringe on religious services, saying, quote, "No one may make use of religion to engage in activities that disrupt public order," end quote. Thus, Article 36 of China's Constitution protects religious beliefs, but then that protection is qualified by saying this right is conditioned on your religious beliefs being normal and on your religious belief being consistent with CCP edicts concerning public order, health, or education. Talk about give it to you and take it away. A Wall Street Journal article on October 12th described the situation in China this way. And again, this is a quote. "Officially, the Communist Party is atheist, with the only legal churches in China being those sanctioned by the state. Yet in recent years, membership at underground churches in China has been estimated in the many millions of people. And now the targeting of home churches has intensified by the CCP. Home churches are an easy target for the CCP for obvious reasons. These are small and have little, if any, power to stand up to the Communist Party. But even the Vatican has bent to the will of the CCP, giving it an unknown power over appointment of the church's bishops in China. Now, I say unknown because the Vatican has not released a copy of that agreement. Now, I mean no criticism of the Catholic Church for that. The situation religious people face in China is certainly suboptimal. The point I make is this: if the Vatican cannot stand up for religious liberty in China against the power of the CCP, small individual home churches, what chance do they have? In fact, no one can stand up to the CCP other than our own government. That means we, all people of faith, of all religions and denominations, must stand unified against attacks on religious liberty against any of us, wherever it occurs. Secretary of State Marco Rubio put out a statement for our own government strongly condemning the CCP's recent detention of leaders of unregistered Zion Christian Church, saying, quote, "This crackdown further demonstrates how the CCP exercises hostility towards Christians who reject party interference in their faith and choose to worship at unregistered house churches." Secretary Rubio called on the CCP to immediately release the detained church leaders and to allow all people of faith, including members of house churches, to engage in religious services without fear of retribution. The history of the Zion Church in China forces us to recall our own experiences right here in America, where our own government's authoritarian urges restricted our own religious services as part of its response to the COVID virus. We should remember how our own churches were closed, notwithstanding the First Amendment. One of the Christian pastors of the Zion Church has now disappeared. He had actually fled China back in 2018 after Chinese authorities targeted the Zion Church, closing its main sanctuary. However, he returned to China knowing very well the risk he faced. He did that, it's reported, in order to be with his congregation. The church building itself had been seized and closed down by the CCP. But services had continued in homes, something the mainstream media denigrates by calling them underground services. Then in 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, the CCP cracked down on home worship. There, as here, devout Christians continued to worship wherever they could, even in Dallas. I know of Catholic masses that were held in private by faithful Christians. The same thing happened in China at the Zion Church. The result was a surge in membership and attendance in online and home church services. As a result, membership in the Zion Church in China grew by more than 100 worship sites, many in private apartments in 40 cities in China. Now, there is a crackdown on people of faith worshiping in their own homes. Let that sink in a minute. They're in their own homes choosing to worship, and that is not okay with the CCP. Nothing, it seems, is sacred when it comes to governments who hunger for power over our lives and even over our faith. Before we dismiss this as something that has happened halfway around the world by a government we all know to be authoritarian, let's remember the things that have recently happened that restrict religious liberty right here at home. Earlier this year, for example, I wrote an editorial published in the New York Post that stood up for the religious liberty of the people in Oklahoma in providing a quality education to children in rural areas through the St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School. Sadly, the Supreme Court voted 4-4 in that case because Judge Barrett had to recuse herself from the decision. That shows you just how delicate our religious liberties really are, even here in the United States, how our religious liberty can hang on a single vote. I think we can all agree that what China has done to Christians is just wrong. But we also need to remember that what happens in China does not stay in China. We must be ever vigilant in protecting our own right to worship right here in America. Standing up for members of the Zion Church in China should energize us to stand up to our own federal and state governments against encroachments of our own religious liberties. Pray for those people who have been disappeared by the CCP. But pray, too, for the children of Oklahoma, whose citizens voted to provide public support for a parochial school whose rural kids desperately needed, only to have that taken away by a state court opinion a divided U.S. Supreme Court could have, should have, and would have reversed, but for the recusal of but one of its members. The real story today is about the importance of religious liberty here and around the world, and how we must be ever vigilant in protecting that all-important right. That is the very important real story. Wherever you're getting the real story, make sure you subscribe and follow. I'll see you tomorrow.